welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be here as always.
It's good to be here, and kind of going to start with a little bit of heavy hitter because there's a topic I think that we've certainly talked about getting to that I think will be a fun one to explore. But life can be difficult, and it can present challenges and things that we don't. Sometimes we see those things coming, sometimes we don't. And I say that because there is a temptation to give up and to quit, and whether it comes to our faith, to being, all these things. And back in 2012, I believe shortly after, what year were you?
I became pastor in the summer of 2011.
Okay, summer 2011. So then within that, within a year, right, you launched the Hebrews series, and anyone who was around remembers a phrase from that time, which was have faith, endure, work hard. And that's really been a theme that I know if people were around, like that's embedded into their hearts. It is mine, like forever. Like that phrase, I'll just always be grateful for that you highlighted out of that book. But can we talk about that? Just because there is, and that's why I started with life is difficult. And everybody listening, and you and I and Arlo, we all have our difficulty. And sometimes there are seasons where it's harder than others, but there's always some challenge we're facing. So it's such a good, encouraging phrase because it's so relevant to every season of life. So I don't know where we want to start with that, but that's...
Well, I mean, I know I would start probably just thinking through how that phrase came about. One, I'm not real clever, so I can confess up front that phrase just sort of evolved, as we were going through the study. I actually... a while back, I had looked at my notes a little bit. It's like, well, when did I first, say, have faith, endure, work hard? And I think it was about July, actually.
How far
started
were we
preaching
into
it in January, and we
Okay.
got somewhere in July is when the phrase actually was kind of explicitly laid out. Now, various times I'd said have faith, various times endure. And I think that's why it just sort of came out, is if you go back and do an honest reading of Hebrews, it really is, there's these repetitive themes, and we would say, like, do not drift, do not doubt, maybe don't quit. Some of those themes were kind of embedded in that early part of the book, and then so much of Hebrews very early on, and then you get into the covenant theology. I mean, just the beauty of God's promises. So much of it is just an exaltation of Christ, and to me, that's the have faith part. If you know how good God is to us, you got to have faith, And somewhere by the summer, that kind of became it. I think I said it once or twice, and it seemed like it resonated, and then it was like, man, we can't look at a chapter in this book without stumbling back over that theme of have faith, endure, work hard.
Well, and that's what was neat about it. It's neat to hear this history of that, because I felt that it didn't feel like you themed this and like let that drive it. It literally was the text helping us, and it was the repetition of those things that you saw and that you were helping us see. So it really was an invitation. Like, I didn't come up, like, it just happens that we keep seeing examples of having faith. We keep seeing challenges and examples of endurance and of working hard. So that's pretty cool to see that. And, if anybody, we can tag that sermon series here for sure. I don't think we were doing
2+ years worth of sermons. That's about how long it took. So
we were in there a while. I remember earlier I asked you, I was like, so we were about a year, and you're like, or 2 or more.
Yeah, it was
so that was a long journey.
But some of that played into the whole theme of the have faith, endure, work hard too, because we made pretty good progress in the book. It's a heavy book in the sense of there's a lot of great theology and a lot of allusions to past Israel's history, so that was one of the reasons why I think it was a fun first study for me to preach through as a pastor, because I love the narratives of the Old Testament. And so here's this book of Hebrews, which really combines the narratives of the Old Testament with good theology and modern day application almost. But we made really good progress all the way through until we got to the Hall of Faith. Yeah. But then if you remember what we did when we got to the Hall of Faith is rather than just reading Hebrews 11, we actually slowed down and we went back to each one of those stories. Okay, Jephthah's in the Hall of Faith. Who is Jephthah? Why is he in here? And Barak and Gideon And, I think what was beautiful about that was we had already started saying have faith, endure, work hard, because the early parts of the book kind of demanded that. It's a constant theme in some ways. But then when you get to the Hall of Faith and you go back and you look at them, it's like every one of these really, there's a lot of things you can pull from it, but over and over again, they're all saying have faith, endure, work hard. And I think that made it kind of resonate once we got there.
So that clearly that's in the scripture, but clearly people, people responded to that. So when you kind of framed it for us, and I think God does do that, right? It's not like, that theme, that phrase, it's biblical, but it really resonated with people to the point to where people remember it. And if you were there, even if you were there shortly after, it seemed like people would talk. I mean, it was just a thing.
Yeah, well, we did a shirt.
It became an identity for our church in some ways. Why do you think it resonated with people so much? Because we can do other, in fairness, not that others are bad. I mean, it's just that not every theme from books hits like that one. Is that fair to say? And that's not a bad thing.
It's true for us, probably. And
that's not a bad thing. I just, there's something unique about that one. Why do you think it resonated with people so much?
Yeah. I would probably guess that some just has to do with our generation and the challenges we're facing. I think, I believe we're watching kind of a great falling away among the church in America. Statistically speaking, if you look at the mainline denominations, they're all shrinking rapidly right now. And some of that self-inflicted, pastoral failure, moral failure, sexual abuse scandals. Some of it is, I think, a result, if a denomination compromises on theology, it would be wise for a believer to probably look for someplace new. Yeah. But, that's not what the numbers show, that people aren't just leaving the churches that have started teaching heresy. They're just leaving the church. And so I think part of it is have faith, endure, work hard kind of speaks to we're living in a culture that's given up on God. And yet the whole book of Hebrews existed. It was written to a group of people, and they were being begged with some authority here, don't give up on God. Let me tell you the story of Moses and the Exodus. Let me tell you about, again, Jephthah and Gideon and Barak and all the. Let me tell you what happened to them. And the reality is, it was so much worse if we put ourselves in the worst of those stories. And yet these people trusted God. They believed in God. They just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and they came out on the other side. And I think that's my guess why it resonated. I think this is probably sad. I really remember, maybe this is my perspective more so than anybody else's. I used the whole Lost in Space, which is an old show that nobody remembered at the time even. We did these Danger Sundays. I don't know if you remember that.
I do now. I had forgotten, but I do remember
there's
that
these
now.
Really harsh, scary passages in Hebrews that theologians really wrestle with, because some of them, they get right up to that edge of making it sound like you can walk away from your faith or lose your faith, which, I want to be clear on this podcast and always, you cannot lose your faith, because the reality is, and Hebrews says it's a covenant between God the Father and God the Son on our behalf. We don't add anything to it. We can't make it happen. We don't earn it. It's not based on any of our. So, of course, if you can't earn it, you can't forfeit it. So salvation is secure, but I think the point of those Danger Sundays and those passages we studied was, don't be an idiot, and cozy right up to the line of living in apathy and doing what I think so many in our culture today do. We've gotten so sucked into the politics of it all and the wokeism of it all and a compromising culture that we're on cruise control. And I think Hebrews, these stern passages exist begging us to see, if you stay on cruise control, you will be like Israel, and you will walk away not from your salvation, but a sense from an authentic faith, and you're going to be in the desert eating dirt and wondering how you got there. And I think maybe that those Danger Sundays for me were always a real challenge to preach, but those were the Sundays where, as scary as they were, you always wanted to finish with what's the answer? Have faith, endure, work hard. And that seemed to it stuck with us.
Yeah, because there is that implication with those things that the temptation will be to like just lack faith, to not endure. What's the opposite of give up? Or there's probably a better even phrase than that, because endure is like to keep doing the same thing consistently. You know, because it's easy to do something right. Like, well, I say easy. It can always be difficult to do the right thing, but easier for a season. But to do it for the long haul, right? That's
different.
And that's what's so powerful about those examples, that it goes back to working hard. It's easy to default to laziness. So we have that. So I guess why those dangers? Why do you think God put those in there? And why are we so prone as people? And I think that's what I love so much about it, is I acknowledge that we are. Like, we're prone to lack faith. We're prone to find a way to give up in some way, thought, attitude, action. And we're prone to kind of default to being lazy and not want to work hard. You know, is it okay to ask like that question? You know, what is it about us? I mean, I know we're people, we're human. We default. Is that just, you know, I don't know if I'm asking. I'm not framing my question quite right.
I think you're phrasing it right, because I think the answer kind of lies in the simplicity of the question. You know, why? Why does that happen? Why are we like this? Why do those simple phrases connect? And it's because we are human. And I think that's what Hebrews, the book as a whole, shows us. Generations before us have repeated these same mistakes. You know, Satan, he can be clever, but he doesn't have to be most of the time, because we do the same dumb stuff, you know, and in so many cases, what worked on your dad will work on you, you know, and you repeat the same mistakes. And I think that's why it resonates, is because we can see ourselves in Israel and the mistakes that they made. And, you know, it's easy to look back and go, well, I can't believe God would part the Red Sea and they would come out of bondage, and then they'd start complaining about how they didn't have good water. Come on, we're all capable of that, I think. And if we're being really honest and really human, we know that. And so, you know, that's why I think it sticks to some degree. And it's even, I think sometimes people might hear that, they think, well, you're just saying the same phrase in a different way 3 times. But it's really not true, because, you know, have faith is that challenge of don't doubt God. Believe in the promises of God. And I think obviously you've got to know the promises of God to really have faith. And so it's that challenge to know God and to experience Him and to believe in Him. You know, endure is more knowing everything that you know. Don't take it for granted. Don't put it on cruise control. Don't let the world kind of slowly suck you in or cause you to just not be aware that there's a war going on. To me, that's what endure means is you know, be aware. Live your life with intentionality, and then I think work hard really results from those first 2. If you know how good you've got it and you're determined to lean into the hardship and to continue, you know, moving forward, then you're gonna work hard, even if you don't see results, even if it doesn't pay off in the short term. You know, and so again, I think that's the message of the book is I don't care what persecution you're under. I don't care how much the world hates you, how crazy life is. You can have faith, endure, and work hard.
No, I appreciate you distinguishing that it is 3 different things, because it does feel like we can take 2 of those and be like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to have faith and endure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do nothing. Right? So I do
you can be a really faithful person sitting on the couch, you know.
You know, and likewise, you can work really hard for a season, and then what's the point? Okay, you did that for a year, and now you've spent 20 years just wasting away life. Like, so so it's good. It's a good balance. I know that's one theme. Did we do our theme balance podcast yet? Did we do that one?
We did something about balance.
Anyway, I know that's something you've challenged me with over the years, is that I remember hearing that from you, whether Sunday morning or conversations around the staff meeting room, but balance is so key. And I do appreciate that 3-tier theme hits a little all those. How do you think we can be aware and pay attention if by default I know it's going to be easy for me? And let's be honest, we kind of started with the challenges in life. So it is easier to do the right thing and to endure and have faith and work hard when life is good.
Yeah.
A little harder when something hits me and I didn't expect it. Maybe it's out of my control. Sometimes sin causes that, and I did something stupid, and now I've got a consequence, and I brought that on myself. But not always. Sometimes it's just the world is broken, and sometimes horrible things happen, and we didn't see it coming. How do we protect ourselves and just have honest inventory of, because I feel like it's deceptive, right? Like if we're being lazy, we don't always, if you come in and say, Justin, you're being lazy in these areas, I'm probably going to get mad and be like, what are you talking about? Because we're not quick to admit where we're at fault. But it would be wise if the temptation is that it's easy to that's why I think if you're like, from my perspective, it resonated with me as a church member. Take me out of the state just as a church member, because I see the temptation to do those things, which is why I love the challenge of like, don't go down that road.
Yeah.
But it's still, that was, do some quick math. My goodness. How many years ago was 12 years ago?
Yeah.
That's so we're over a decade later, and the temptation's still there. How can we as believers do inventory of that, of checks and balances of, and you kind of got to do a 3-tier thing, but whether it's have faith, endure, work hard, how do I gauge that? How do I make sure that I'm not falling prey to even just one of those? Because it feels like, you take one, you might derail all of them.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do I know?
Yeah.
Big question.
Well,
I want to be honest, because I feel like, it's interesting because over the 12 years ago is when we had that. And, working with college students, we see it, whether you're working with college, youth, young adult, senior adult, anybody can fall prey to that. Like that can happen. And the danger thing is real, because there's examples in scripture, like we highlighted the good ones, and then there's others where it's like, oh, pay attention to these too. As you've said many times from the pulpit, not every example in the Bible is what to do. Like sometimes it's don't do that. Like, learn from this. And I love that about you've helped our church see that. So, maybe people listening, they weren't around for that series, but they would agree, okay, yeah, have faith, endure, work hard. If they do a quick reading of Hebrews, they'll see it. So moving on, like just in our life, what are some things you've done maybe since then in the last 12 years? We've certainly had some hurdles. What are some things that you've leaned on, having spent time there? That theme. I imagine God's used it to bless you and challenge you. Maybe help us in that way. What are some things you've done and taken that have helped you over the last 12 years since you've been in there?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it is, you preach a series. There's a phrase kind of coined, did it do us any good? What's the takeaway now? How's it holding up? And I think that's another reason why I do love that whole concept, because I think it puts things in real simple clarity for us. Again, I'm thinking less in terms of just have faith, endure, work hard, but in terms of the series itself, in terms of the book of Hebrews, what I love about it is that it shows us all these different people in different situations. Some of them are crisis situations. Some of them really, it mentions Caleb, and we can go to a crisis situation that Caleb was in. But really, if I remember, the book of Hebrews talks a lot about how, Caleb, there was a certain piece of land that Caleb wanted. And even he was 100-something, and it was finally time to take that land. And he's like, that's mine. I'm going to go do that. And, what was cool about it was that if you look at his story, there were some young guys who helped him. He's pretty old at this point. I'm not sure how much physical sword fighting or whatever he could do, but he had inspired a generation of men. And so when he let out, they wanted to be with him. And so you think, well, what was he doing? Well, so he was watching a generation die. Again, I don't have time to repreach all of Caleb's story, but he spent 40 years burying all of his friends. And then when that time period of waiting was over, he was ready to be obedient and faithful. But you get this impression that there was something about how he lived his life that caused people to be attracted to him. And some people would say those were wasted years. He wasn't fighting any giants at that time. He wasn't winning any battles. They were literally wandering around waiting for God's clock to reach an end point. But Caleb was clearly living a different kind of life. Now, we could go to several of those other stories, and it's, bullets are flying, so to speak, and it's life or death. And there's something in us maybe that relates to that. But I think true faith is a faith that you're cultivating a personal relationship with God when it's good, when it's bad, when it's normal. And I think that's what we need to be squeezed to is, somebody smarter than me coined the phrase, character is revealed in crisis. If you're waiting on a crisis, and say, well, when it gets here, I'll be ready. No. You're either ready today or you're not. Yeah. Because when the crisis comes, you're going to be revealed for who you really are. And so the time to start to have faith, endure, work hard is today, whether it's a good time or it's a bad time, because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And the reality is life is just a series of good days, bad days, normal days, routine days. And I think we're called to do the same thing every day. That's to seek to know Christ more, study His Word, and again, I love Hebrews because it's a theological treatise, but every one of the points are punctuated with, let me tell you about this guy's life, and we can be, I'm nervous about church. We have all kinds of stories in our church, but when you ask somebody, hey, would you share your story? Never entirely sure what you're going to get, and some people just aren't comfortable with the crowd. Some people, maybe you don't know how exactly they'll explain it. The book of Hebrews is this expose on Christians' lives that we can open, and with confidence we can study what happened, and we can see how God moved, and we can learn. And I'm telling you, you need to do that today regardless of what's happening in your life.
That's a good word, because I feel like when we started, hey, what's our topic? In have faith, endure, work hard, I defaulted to kind of that crisis. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's kind of where, which is, we can have difficulty. We will have difficulty. But it's not always that. And I do feel like one reason it resonated also with me is that if I go back to that time, we had a 2-year-old and a newborn. So we were in that season of life. So we're like not sleeping and we're in survival mode.
Yeah, you were in crisis mode. Yeah.
It was crisis mode. So that's probably, maybe that's why I defaulted there. But that's really good observation you just made, because one thing that drives me mad with Christians is that when life is just that steady, because we live like kind of from mountaintop to mountaintop, and sometimes God will give us those, and those are great, like celebrate those, that's awesome. But the immature mistake people make is, okay, so I'm chasing mountaintops. Yeah. And if they find themselves, which is where we'll spend most of our life, in just that steady, just kind of medium, what's the word for that? It's just like, hey, I'm working a job. I'm being faithful to my wife, my family, my kids. I'm just doing the basic things. I'm changing diapers. We're doing the basic things. Now all of a sudden it's like, I feel like I got to go chase a mountaintop, and they forget that have faith, endure, work hard, like is exactly what you just said.
It's for the mundane in so many ways.
The mundane, that's the word. Yeah. I forgot it. Thank you. It's the mundane.
Yeah. Well, I love that. The father of modern missions or whatever, William Carey, in some ways, one of the quotes of his I always remember is, somebody asked him, what makes you special or unique? And he's like, I don't think I'm special, but I can plod. And, for me, that's what endure really means. And you got to know his heart to understand. Really, he's saying, I can have faith. I have a goal. I believe in what God's asked me to do. I can get up every single day, whether it's warm or cold or bitter or, it doesn't matter what's happening. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do the same thing, the right way, and trust God with the results. I can plod. And, again, to plod, in his term, you got to be pointed in the right direction, and you got to be doing the right things. And I think, that's some of that's maybe my personality. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not a type A, emotional guy pushing everybody. I can plod. That's right. And I think at the end of the day, that's part of what Hebrews is saying. People get in trouble when they think they're going to be measured by their high times, or they think they're going to be measured by their low times. The reality is we all need to see this life is not all there is. again, Hebrews spends so much time on,
Yep.
on the hope that we've been given. And, how come Abraham plotted? Because he believed in a far better country, and we did some things with Tolkien and a far green country. And I don't know. There's just so
got
much.
a good memory. I had forgotten some of these
I just
things,
remember
man.
it all. But there's so much.
I remember the phrase. I didn't remember some of these
Yeah.
nuggets, like the danger.
Yeah, there's just so much imagery there, though, about
Yeah.
what we're living for.
Yeah.
And if you truly understand how good it's going to be, it doesn't matter how bad it is now. You just get up and do the right thing the right way and have faith, endure, work hard. And I don't know. That, to me, again, we're just kind of unraveling and trying to go through, 12, 13 chapters of a book at the same time, So,
So many people don't finish well.
it's
And-
a symptom of our age, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And so how do we take these lessons and how can we use those to finish well? Because nobody wants to finish poorly, and yet
Yeah.
a lot of people that are giving up on faith and they're ceasing to endure. They're no longer working hard. They're just done. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw in the towel. I'm done. And that's sad. And it comes out in a variety of ways, right? But instead of getting into details of like which ways, it's just, it happens, and it can happen to us.
Yeah.
How do we finish strong and keep doing that the rest of our days?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we measure wrong, and so we set our heart's affections on the wrong goals. And so then when life, if you're given an opportunity to finish well, in my opinion, it's one thing to be a 19-year-old man and you're charging Germany in the trenches of World War I. You're probably, you're going to finish. They were facing death, and you could say, well, they finished well, knowing what was coming. That's not really what we're talking about. If we live long enough to have our days slowly run out, in a sense, how do we finish well? And I think it's the same way again that we're talking about how you live life. Don't set your affections on the wrong things. If you think living life rightly is by having a great career or making a bunch of money or winning the big ball game or passing this test or that test or this mountaintop experience, if that's how you're going to measure victory now, when you get older, that's how you're going to measure finishing well. And the reality is, as we get older, I think the privileges we're given, you should have family to mentor. You should have grandkids to love on, and you should have a legacy to see play out. And the way you finish well is you continue to look like Jesus when your health isn't great, when you're not physically active, when your life gets smaller. And the only way to do that is to focus on Jesus now. If I can have faith, endure, work hard as a 40 or a 50-year-old, then I feel pretty comfortable I can have faith, work hard when I'm a 70, 80-year-old saint, because methodology is the same. But if you're going to make it about the big event, the big showdown, the big crisis, I think you're going to fail.
That's a good word. Do we ever graduate? Do we ever arrive on this side?
No,
Do we ever,
I think that's why
I
Hebrews
think I hear you saying
yeah.
you better keep it. Yeah.
I think that's what resonates with the book and with the phraseology and even the entirety of Scripture. You don't graduate until Jesus comes back. So, hey, we're giving you 3 little pieces of advice that will be good no matter if you're 20, you're 30, you're 60, you're 80. Have faith, endure, work hard. Keep doing the right thing the right way. Point toward Jesus. Trust His promises. I don't care if it's good or it's bad. This will see you through. And I think that's the beauty of it.
That's a good word, man. I love that, and what a fun time that was good. I love that, and you're right. We did T-shirts. We did little stickers. I think there's one on the inside of my
yard
Bible to this
signs,
day.
yeah.
I forgot about the yard signs. I have a sticker inside of my Bible to this day, and I didn't know it. I was gifted a rebinding of the Bible, and I was so happy. And then I put that sticker on the inside, and it the outside, it's shaped like the sticker. I was like,
Yeah.
what happened? But anyway, it's there permanently for sure.
Well, there you go. It's
But I love
impressed.
the phrase, man. I'm so glad that the Lord kind of helped you frame that and helped us as a church see that and be a part of it. And I think that's a theme that it's a good one, because we all do I think there's a desire in everyone to finish well. But you're right, and I appreciate you helping identify that doesn't happen because you get to the end of your life. You're like, oh, about to die, better go ahead and.
Yeah,
It happens by being faithful, to have faith, endure, work hard through the mundane, through the highs, through the lows, through the medium, like through it all. And if I'm steady with that, then whatever comes, I've learned. And I think that was really cool to hear you talk about that I build up the ability to endure through the hard seasons by being faithful in the steadiness of life. Because if I'm not steady during the mundane, how am I ever prepared for a super high or super low? Like I'm going to be probably going to fall off the rocker, So
probably.
I think that's a good wisdom that I appreciate you challenging us with to think about. So that's good stuff, man. Anything else you want to share from that series? That's 12 years ago, but it's still fresh.
That's about all my brain can remember. I know
all right.
that. So.
Well, that's good. Thank you so much. And we do hope and pray that, that's a conversation that can encourage. It encourages me. I love it. So thank you, Greg. And until next time.
Yes, sir.
God bless.